Hello and welcome to GM the GM, a podcast about all things escape rooms from a behind-the-scenes games master perspective. In this episode, I'll be explaining all about locks and how to use them, including a few insider tips. So playing escape rooms, you will come across a lot of different types of locks. And there's quite a bit to be known about these little devices that can make your life and experience easier. So in this episode, I hope to cover a lot of tips on how to use the most common locks found in escape rooms. The first one I'm going to talk about is the most simple type of lock, I suppose. It's just a regular padlock that requires a key to open it. I'm sure all of you have seen and used one of these before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the only thing I will say about this type of lock is that when you find a key and you're sure that it's for this particular padlock, then just try the key both ways around. I have often seen players try a key on a padlock, think that it doesn't work and walk away or give up. But all they had to do was just turn the key around because the padlock was just not on the way they were expecting it, I suppose. Where I work, we do put a padlock on sort of the opposite way around to what it should be, and that is just for aesthetic purposes. But if your games master was in a hurry, for example, and resetting the room, then they perhaps put the padlock on the wrong way around. Therefore, the key would need to also be turned around in order to work. So that's just my little simple tip for those types of lock. If you're certain that this key should open this lock, then just give it a little try, turn it around and try again. The next type of lock that's very common in escape rooms is a number combination lock. And these are usually between 3 and 5 numbers. The most common problem that I see with these types of lock is that players complain that they're stuck. So a player is got a number that they think is the correct combination for this lock. They start to turn the dials and the lock gets stuck and the dials won't turn. And here's a little insider piece of information for you. But if this happens, it's usually because you're on the right track. So this is actually something that people that pick locks will feel for. They'll be turning the dials and trying to feel for the stiff parts of the turn. As you're turning it, if it starts to get stiff, then it usually means that you're along the right lines and you're probably entering the correct numbers. However, there is an easy way out of it. All you need to do is push the shackle down into the main body of the lock, so squeeze the lock together, in other words, and the tumblers will free up and you'll be able to spin them freely and continue putting in your combination. So try hard not to pull down on a lock when you're trying to put in the correct combination, because it's that pulling down on the shackle that makes the lock go stiff. As soon as you squeeze it back together, it frees it up completely and you're able to use it properly. Another common problem with the number combination lock is when people don't know where to line up the numbers. This is when you need your glasses or somebody with good eyesight. And oh my goodness, I wish I had £1 for every time I heard someone say, "Oh yeah, that was me. I lined it up in the wrong place." Or, "I don't know why I'm trying this lock. I need my glasses." So my first tip really is, if you're trying to undo a combination padlock and your eyesight is poor and you don't have your glasses, then give it to somebody else to try. That's probably the best thing to do, because you're going to end up getting frustrated and handing it over to someone else anyway. And it will save you time if you just let that person do it straight away. But if it's not your eyesight, that's a problem. You just don't know this fact. Well, just know then that on every combination lock, there will be a line or an indication of where you need to line the numbers up. And you do have to be quite precise, otherwise the lock won't open. On that subject, it's probably also worth mentioning that the lock won't just ping open quite dramatically, and it won't always be really obvious that you've opened it. So another thing that I see a lot is people entering a combination and then not realizing that the lock is open and then just walking away and giving up. After you've entered a combination, if you're convinced that it's right, just take a good look at the lock and check whether it's actually open. So many times I've seen a player try to open a lock, think that they failed, walked away, and then another teammate goes over and says, "Oh, the lock's open." So double check your locks before giving up. Another type of combination lock is the letter combination lock, and this would usually be horizontal rather than vertical, like the number combinations. I don't know whether vertical letter locks exist. I haven't ever used one myself or come across whilst playing, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Maybe I just haven't found one yet. Quite a lot of letter locks, well, I say quite a lot, some letter locks may be 3D printed as well. I know quite a few escape rooms that have invested in a 3D printer because quite often the things that we need to create an escape room are very unique and weird, wonderful, and impossible to find in regular hardware stores and things like that. So I do know that 3D printing is certainly a thing in the escape room industry because it just makes things a little bit easier when you need something unique to just print it yourself. Now, that's not really relevant to how these locks work, it's just a little tidbit for you. Thought you might like to know that. But with letter combination locks, it's worth saying that it wouldn't always necessarily be a word that opens this lock. Sometimes it might just be a string of characters. So don't assume that you're going to get a word. As I've said, the lock is horizontal, usually, as far as I'm aware. And when you get the correct code, and it will have a place for you to line up the letters, just like a number combination lock. So once you've lined it up correctly and you've got the correct code, you will need to pull the lock downwards. And it has two stages. So it kind of clicks down once and then clicks down twice. And on the second click, it's open. I've seen players get caught out with this because they may only click it down once and think that they've failed. But mostly I've been caught out by this, and GMs get caught out by this. I'm sure the GMs listening have done this at one point or another. When you relock these locks, when you're resetting a room, as it has 2 clicks to undo, it also has 2 clicks to lock again. So you have to click it and then click it again, and then you scramble the combination. And I have certainly only clicked it the once and accidentally left the lock open. So just beware, GMs, on those locks. And beware, players. Yeah, they could be a little bit tricky. The next type of lock that I'm going to talk about is my least favourite. And it's the combination safe type of lock. The types that you see people in movies putting their ear against, and then they turn the dial and listening for the clicks in order to try and break the safe. Yeah, those. I've yet to play a room that uses one of these locks seamlessly and successfully, so maybe I'm just awful with them, but whenever I see one, I don't even want to try. I just give it to somebody else in my team. Luckily though, I don't come across them that much. I don't think they're that widely used in escape rooms, possibly because they can be a bit complicated. The way to open them is to be given, or to, figure out with the puzzles, a number and then a direction or a number of turns to another number and then another direction or number of turns, and so on until the lock clicks open. And as I said, I just really don't like these. I've never been able to use one successfully, and so I don't enjoy them. And therefore, I don't really have any tips for using them. Instead, perhaps you can give me some tips for using them. Please do feel free to send me a message and give me any tips that you might have for this type of lock. The next one to mention is a directional lock. And yes, I can hear a collective groan from everybody out there. But my experience with these locks have not been that bad, though I do know that they are quite hated in the escape room community. I think that if they're used sensibly, then I don't really have a problem with them. I have had instances where there have been a lot of directions to follow, and it did get tedious, and if the lock doesn't open, then you have to start all over again. Unlike a number lock, where if you've tried, it wouldn't be this, but if you tried 1, 2, 3 in a lock, and then you realise that's not correct, the numbers will stay there. The 1, 2, 3 will stay there. You can go and rework the puzzle, figure out the correct combination, come back and say it's 3, 2, 1. You can just swap the numbers around. It's quite easy. With a directional lock, though, if you've gone wrong somewhere, you can't just leave it and then start again. Sorry, I don't mean start again as in start from the beginning. I mean, you can't just leave it where it is and continue once you've figured out the correct instructions. You have to start all the way back at the beginning. So if you do have, say, more than 10 directions and the lock doesn't open at the end of it, it can be quite a lot of work to go and rework the puzzle, try a different combination of 10 directions in order to try and get the lock open. I've actually done one with more than 10 directions, and yes, it did get a bit frustrating. So for that reason, I would say around 4 to 8 directions is fine, and I think as long as the puzzle is nice and logical and is not frustrating, then I think there's nothing wrong with a directional lock. It's been my experience that if a company uses a directional lock in one of their games, that they will usually give you a tutorial before you start the game. So I apologise if what I'm about to say is repeating something you've already heard, but I thought it would just be worth going over how they work. You have the main body of the lock and it will have a circular disc on it. Then there will be the shackle. In order to start, you have to press the shackle down twice, and this resets the lock. Click the shackle down twice, and then you can begin putting in the combination of directions that you think is correct. For example, if it was up, down, up, you would push the disc upwards. You would then need to let it move back to the middle, then go downwards, then back to the middle, and then up. If up, down, up was correct, then the lock would pop open. Sometimes it's a bit difficult when going from like up to right, or up to left, or down to left, or down to right, because you can forget to let that little disc go back to the center. So you can see how these can be frustrating for people, because you do have to be ever so precise with them and move it to the direction you want, let it go back to the middle, then move it to the next direction, back to the middle, etc. If you're in a hurry and if your time's running out, then you might be doing this a bit too quickly, and therefore the lock won't open, and then you have to start all over again, double click the shackle and begin again. It can get quite frustrating. So I can kind of understand why people don't like them. Also, just as a little side note, but I've heard that these locks break quite easily and regularly. So if you are a designer considering one, then just bear that in mind. And apparently, according to owners, I've heard that you will need to definitely have some spares and you will be replacing them quite often. So perhaps that's another reason that they're not used that much. A digital keypad could be found on a safe or a door or anywhere really. The main bugbear I have with digital keypads is not knowing how many numbers you have to enter. Very often, if you enter a wrong number too many times, it will lock you out, and that could be anything from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. I think it's a little bit unfair not to indicate how many numbers are needed, as that will increase the likelihood of getting it wrong by quite a lot. I've played a couple of games where this has been a problem and it's gotten quite frustrating. It wouldn't be that difficult to just have a little pointer on the area or around the keypad somewhere to indicate how many numbers or letters, usually numbers, but just to indicate how many characters that you need. Also, not just how many characters you need, but whether you have to press a button afterwards. The most frustrating time I've ever had with a digital keypad was when there was no indication of how many numbers I needed, and also no instruction on what I had to press. I had a set of numbers, but then there was a key symbol and also a hashtag. I had no idea which one. Was it the key symbol, as in unlock, like the key to unlock it, or was it the hash symbol, which it has been in previous experiences? I think I got it wrong on my first guess, so I had to try again anyway, and then I think I still had the wrong combination, so I had to go back, rework the puzzle, and try again. It just got quite frustrating. This is a little tip, or not really a tip, this is a request, I suppose, for owners and GMs out there. If you have a keypad in your room, in your game, then please give them a clean every now and then. I have seen quite grubby ones before, which is gross, and it could also give away the numbers if left like that for a while, because it's obviously the most dirty ones. They are the most used numbers. I have definitely seen a keypad or two out there which I haven't really wanted to touch because it's been quite grubby. Doesn't take much, does it? Just grab a cloth, give them a little wipe over every now and then. That would be lovely, thank you. The final type of lock that I'm going to talk about is a magnetic lock. These are called maglocks in the trade. As a player, if you're not in the industry, you probably won't really notice these, as they are electronically controlled and they're either automatic or they're controlled by a remote. These are the locks that you hear clicking when you've done something correctly. It's that situation where you do something, you hear a click, and then you have to go hunting for the sound to see what you've opened. They can get a little bit warm sometimes, so I have noticed that players notice them sometimes because they might just brush by it or touch it and they go, oh, that's warm. It's worth just noting that a magnetic lock, when it's engaged, it will get warm, but they should never get so hot that they burn or anything, but they definitely do warm up a little bit. And as soon as they are unengaged or released, then they will cool down. These types of locks are great for surprises and secret doors, as they don't require any codes or input from the customer. They just require an action that will result in a surprise. Players are often impressed and delighted that just because they moved an object or put an object down or, did something, that a door springs open or a secret room is revealed. It's a pretty cool effect, and here's a little insider fact for you. Sometimes these locks are remote controlled, as I mentioned, and therefore it's actually your GM that is controlling them. It means that your GM is watching you very, very carefully and intently for the required action to release the lock. They may be looking at you very intently with squinty eyes at the camera, because sometimes it is a little bit hard to see. And so as soon as you do whatever it is that you need to do, they will click a button and the maglock will release. So sometimes your GM is working even harder than you'll ever know to make a room magical for you. All right then, I am going to stop there, as I wanted to cover the most common types of lock, and I think I've done that. There are many, many more sort of weird and wonderful locks and lock mechanisms, but I'm not going to continue on with all of those. And I hope I've managed to make a fairly boring subject a little bit insightful for you. Well done if you've made it this far. And as always, you can email me, gmthegm@aol.com. You can find me on Facebook by searching GM the GM. And if you think that I'm doing a good job and you'd like to donate to keep this podcast going, then you can head over to Patreon, www.patreon.com/GMthegM. I would be very grateful for anything you'd like to give. And very soon I am going to have to pay for a subscription to keep my podcasts online indefinitely. So any help is much appreciated. Thank you. So guys, I will talk to you again soon. Thank you so much for listening. And in the meantime, keep on escaping.